welcome back everybody. This I think is going to be our last video on connection, but it's been very interesting because between filming the last one and filming this one, we're having a conversation with somebody else, and this is really our work, is about co-production. It's about listening to different views and perspectives, and the person that we were talking to brought up such an important point that we feel we've actually missed in terms of the discussion around connections. We spoke about connecting with ourselves and things like music and that, but it's really important to acknowledge that connection is not just between people or between things that we do. Connection can very much be with nature and with animals, and the research and the evidence is all out there about the impact and the value of connecting with nature and with animals, and those are two huge things in my life. I grew up in South Africa, and one of the things I do to connect is I take my shoes off and I go outside and I walk in my bare feet. When I need to feel connected, need to feel grounded, when you look even at trauma therapy and things, grounding techniques, it's very much about placing our feet on the ground and connecting with the earth. And my dogs are my greatest wellness tool. Being with my dogs, stroking my dogs, they calm, they soothe, they make me feel connected, they make me feel loved. You know, that whole piece is there with that. So that's the value of co-production, is having conversations with other people, because we hadn't even mentioned that, and yet that's central to that. And as well in that discussion was a talk about how our upbringings, our life experiences, our individual circumstances, our individual personalities even, can be barriers to connection, or can make what's good connection for you actually quite challenging connection for me, depending on our personality types or our life experiences. How we connect can be different. And we're the Recovery College, and I'm a person with lived experience because I'm a person who's in recovery, and there's debates about, are we in recovery, have we recovered? We do training. We've got a session about what is recovery mean, that it's an individual journey. But in fact, the word recovery in itself can be a barrier for people, and that's for a number of different reasons. One of the reasons is, just thinking of my personal experience, I was a person who was acutely unwell for many, many years, and the word recovery wasn't even mentioned where I was at. And where I was at that time, the Recovery College was here. I certainly wouldn't be a person who could use the Recovery College because I wasn't well enough to use the Recovery College. And there can also be the understanding that recovery is something that is located within the Recovery College. And all that is a little bit challenging for me, because for many reasons, and we're going to talk about personal responsibility, social responsibility, organizational responsibility. We're going to talk about that in this video. But the thing is that recovery is not something that is located within a Recovery College. And recovery is not a word that I identify very clearly with myself now, because my journey is about a healing journey. It's about the fact that I was a person with all these labels and diagnoses, and then I was suddenly the lady who had this great recovery. And my recovery is anything but great. It's very hopeful, but I have my ups and downs, and I have my challenges, and I might need to go back and use services. There can be the understanding that if a person is in recovery, that they'll never have a crisis again. They'll never need to use services again. They don't need support. They don't need help. So there can be a lot of misunderstandings around that.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, Lisa, you're absolutely right. There is an assumption made that recovery means often for people that you're at the end of the journey, that you have achieved everything that you need to achieve to get well, to be better, to never use services again. A very common assumption that is made, and definitely not correct. And also, while Lisa has just said there that recovery is not necessarily located in the Recovery College, the whole idea of recovery is also, should not be assumed that the idea of recovery is located actually within mental health services or in the wider services. But for mental health services in particular, which I think we need to spend some time having a bit of a discussion around and put an emphasis on, because it's really, really important. If we're talking about connection, that we're talking about the values that are underneath the word recovery, because that's essentially about the work that we are, that drives us, the ethos, the principles and the values that drive us are about connection, they're about honesty, about openness, about a journey, about healing, as you said, Lisa.
Respect for different experiences, different
absolutely.
Journeys.
That whole piece is so important. And I had recently had the privilege of having a very useful conversation for my own self and for others with a person who is a carer, whose loved one was in receipt of acute services for the first time, and after a period of time being involved in those acute services, the person was automatically moved into another part of services, and the word recovery was part of the name of that service. And she entered into, she was telling me about, she entered into this whole state of panic around recovery. How could my loved one be in a recovery service now where he's nowhere near recovery? When her and I had a really useful conversation about what the word recovery then meant, because she understood it to be exactly what most people assume it is, that you're at the end of your journey, that you may no longer need services, or you may need a different service. And there's this sense about being moved into another service, moved along the path. And what does that actually mean for the people who are using services and the family? What does that actually mean? And for me, what really drives me in this work is to be able to see underneath that word recovery. So we had a really good conversation about, no, it's not actually about that at all, and it isn't. Recovery isn't about the end of the journey. You make a very useful point there, Lisa, about maybe now actually as part of your journey you still might need to use services, different services in a different way, but still part of your journey. So whilst the word recovery is a fabulous word in terms of opening doors for different experiences, it does not mean that it's the end of the journey, nor should it mean, but we espouse to the values underneath that,
yes,
around what it actually means.
And I think for me the important thing to say about it, as somebody who there wasn't a lot of hope for, is that we wouldn't want this word to make people feel hopeless. And sometimes maybe if we don't have a good understanding of the values and the principles underpinning that, you could think that's something that I could never attain. I'm sitting here as somebody who is in recovery. I'm doing work that I would have done before. These are my skills and experiences and things. Yeah. But I've been in a place where I haven't felt that hope, where I haven't felt that I would ever be a person who would be living a life that was meaningful to me. And that's what recovery is about, starting to heal those things that make us feel disconnected and not belonging and not part of. And if you've been in services, you can already feel that there's judgments and there's prejudices with the labels and the symptoms and the risk assessments and the things that come with that.
Yes.
That can already make you feel excluded and disconnected.
Yeah, and what doesn't help that is the idea that we in services should expect people who are in recovery to take personal responsibility. Because there's something about that personal responsibility, the expectation around taking personal responsibility, handing it back to people without helping people who use services to start understanding what it is to have control over your life and to have hope.
And that's got to be done in connection. Yeah. I had to take responsibility and do my bit, but I needed around me the circumstances, the services, the organisation, my community. Everybody needs to, all of that needs to be in place in order for people to be able to also take responsibility, options and choices. That's about us working collectively. And it's the same for in services. What we've seen through doing these videos and being part of this well-being piece in the trust is that in fact the work is about the values and principles. It's about the compassion, it's about the respect, the honesty, it's about connecting as human beings beyond our labels. It's about looking at emotional health and well-being. Mm-hmm. Recovery and the work that we do is not limited just to one service. This is about being with people. It's how we are with people. It's how we connect with people. It's bringing those values to life, in what we do. Yeah. And I think that's what's been so powerful about this. We talk about crisis being an opportunity for growth, is that barriers have been broken down in terms of organisational barriers. We've been able to work across sections. Co-production is about bringing together skills, experience, expertise that we all bring as individuals in our professional lives, and it's the same for individuals in your family life, in your communities. But this is about, connection is really about collective responsibility. We all need to, for people who are in distress at this moment in time, for whatever reason, going home to difficult circumstances, broken relationships, poverty, worrying about where food is being put on the table, struggling with mental health issues, whatever the issues are out there, this is our collective responsibility to work together. And I think the hope for me here and through this crisis has been about being able to open these conversations, seeing barriers breaking down, starting to connect as people with our colleagues, with people in the community, and being able to have these discussions to open this out, because it's about being real. If we really want to help people, which is what we want to do, if you're working in services as somebody wanting, you're there. Most people are there because they want to help, they want to make a difference. And whether your journey is about one that you're at home, there can be this concept around recovery and mental health services that somehow if you're in recovery that you're going to work full time. We're all different. Our circumstances, who we are, where we're at in our life is very, very individual and different. But we need to bring, and what we hold, and the hope that I hold, and I can be feel very passionate about this, because sometimes people look at me and think, well, I've got it all together. I've got my family, and I've got my home, and I've got my work now. I didn't have that for many, many years. Things were very hopeless for me. I was very despairing. I didn't think that there would ever be a life beyond this. I had lost all those connections because of my mental health challenges. So I've been there. You know, I've faced the abyss, and through the collective responsibility, through other people being there, being that connection, helping support, I have been able to journey to a place where life is meaningful, where getting up in the morning means I feel a sense of hope, I feel a sense of purpose. I have my days that I struggle, but it's been that collective piece of work that has helped me get to where I am at. So I feel I can talk about hope, and I can believe in hope, and if I can believe it for myself, and if it's happened for me, I cannot not hold that for other people. Absolutely. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
And that can feel very inaccessible. If I think where I was at, that could feel very inaccessible to me. How do I get to that place? And that's sometimes about having people in my life, and I have days where that hope is challenged, and I have people in my life who hold that space for me to kind of have that hope, you know. And that's just a really important message, you know, in terms of connection and out there. And I don't know if you want to...
Well, just to finish off on that, Lisa, equally as it is for you, it is for me, and that's my experience. Whilst Lisa shares her lived experience and her journey with me, and we are able to work together and share those experiences, I am also given permission through her own vulnerability to be vulnerable myself, to be able to connect with you, which is very, very powerful. And that helps me do a better job. It helps me work in this whole area of recovery, as we call it, in a better way. It helps me show up for human beings, and it helps me do my best. And I feel less afraid of it. I'm able to connect, and that's what's really, really important, so that we can bring the best version of ourselves and the best version of this work to the people that we serve. And really that's what this is all about. So thank you.